clearly Eugene had the compassion and the ability to regulate his emotion, all of the things we're trying to bring to the world today. Sea Learning is giving the children of the world a better way. And as adults, our job is now to make ourselves ready for that challenge. And in the next 3 days, I know many more educators all over the world, through being live streamed as well as being there in person, will begin to learn these really concrete ways that they can make a difference. In the meantime, this gathering will help spread the word far and wide. We know that the things that Dan Goleman talked about that are happening in the world are not inevitable, they're preventable. We know that. And we know that the children who are learning this new way of being have what I call weapons of the spirit. They won't be stopped in creating a world worthy of our children. I thank you, Your Holiness, for all your support, all your wisdom, and all your encouragement to make this day and these next couple of days happen. And I know the world will be so much richer for it. I thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. And now, finally, we'll hear from Professor Kim Schonert-Reichl.
Great, thank you, Brendan. So this is a momentous occasion for the world. Your dream of educating the heart, of bringing it into education, is now happening. We know from the research, as Dan shared, that this programs like Sea Learning, social and emotional learning programs, can make a difference in children's lives. It's a global movement around the world. There's many countries using social and emotional learning, and places like UNESCO and the Organization for Economic and Cooperative Development, or OECD, are now embracing social and emotional learning as they move forward. We know this is to address problems we don't even know we have yet. But I started out as a teacher with children who had many problems. And at that time, I had nothing from which to draw from. Problems, who left school, who were in jail. And at that time, I didn't know what to do. And what I find now today is we have the science. Back then, we did not have the research. I couldn't make the case for using this in school. And some of the things I just want to highlight and reiterate is we know social and emotional learning predicts these important adult outcomes. As Dan said, that graduate from high school,
yes,
and earn higher and even students who have social and emotional learning are more likely to know that these skills can be taught. There's something, I believe Richie Davidson has talked a lot about, neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity shows us that you can teach these skills, that in fact they make a difference, and the programs make a difference in children's lives. As a teacher, I received no training or preparation in social and emotional learning. I didn't know what to do. Now with Sea Learning, it now embeds some until now, a focus on educating the heart, compassion, as well as the systems thinking, the idea of resilience, as well as attention training. Sea Learning really addresses a gap. Sea Learning addresses a gap that we did not have until now. And also, what's so important is, as countries move to have social and emotional learning, many don't have the curriculum translated into their languages. And Sea Learning has that ability to bring to the world. So I've heard you for the last 20 or more years talking about the importance of educating the heart and how we have to bring this into education. And now that is coming true. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Now we'd like to open up to questions from the media. I'll just ask you, because we are here for the global launch of the Sea Learning program, and we have our education experts whom we've heard from. At first, we'd like to take questions related to education, and then if we have time, we'll open up for other more general questions. If you would raise your hand, the microphone will be brought to you. Shwetal? Right here, right here.
Mr. Director, could you tell why have you chosen India as a venue for this global launch? And the second question I may add is that I believe this subject which you are trying to promote also deals with spirituality, because without spirituality underbirds this entire concept. So how are you going to mix this spirituality with science, as Madam Professor, she referred to science. Now, how are you going to synthesize both of them? And I get an impression that such a vast subject is being cabined into a small, like, classroom thing. I mean, how do you go about it?
Okay, thank you for your questions. I'll just say a word about India, and then I'd actually like to refer your question on science and spirituality to His Holiness. He's written extensively on this topic. As I mentioned, there has been a 20-year collaboration between Emory University and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His Holiness lives here in India. It is convenient for us to have the launch here. We wanted His Holiness to preside over the launch. However, there are bringing about secular ethics, an approach to spirituality and ethics that's secular. And as His Holiness has mentioned, India has a very long tradition of having many different religions, yet they have coexisted peacefully here for the most part throughout this very long history. So His Holiness has said India has a secular constitution. Secular not meaning against religion, but meaning open to people of all religions. So spirituality can be acknowledged, accepted, the ethical life can be appreciated, and it doesn't matter if we have different religious traditions. We find them almost all here. So His Holiness has held up India as a great example of what the world can be, that we don't have to allow our differences to divide us, and we can still have a common ethical basis based on our common humanity. So the program is a global, Reichel said, for the entire world, translated now into 12 languages. Happy to have the global launch here. Now, is there a tension between science and spirituality, or is this an approach to spirituality?
Among the civilization, different civilization, Egyptian civilization, Chinese civilization, Indus Valley civilization, eventually, I think Indus Valley civilization, I think, developed much sort of knowledge about human mind, and also philosophical fields like philosophy, or physics, quantum physics. So, one, my very, very close friend, late Raja Ramana, nuclear physicist, he once told me, in the West, quantum physics is something new. But in India, 2,600 years ago, already developed quantum physics. This is true. When we discuss with scientists about quantum physics, it seems we know much deeper. Because, you see, we already learn, like Chitta Mantra, philosophical fields. You see, there are different sort of philosophical school of thought. and including Nalanda tradition. So we learn these things. So then India, over 3,000 years, concept about non-violence, ahimsa, and karuna. Buddha himself, product of Indian tradition. So now India has some sort of potential to help humanity through combination of modern education and ancient education. Ancient Indian education dealing with our emotion. And modern education is in dealing with material value, including science and technology. So India, you already have the knowledge and how to training our emotion through practice of shamatha, practice of vipassana. So I feel India should pay more attention. And in order to make certain significant contribution for world, firstly, India itself should revive these ancient Indian knowledge. Not newly introduced, but just to revive ancient Indian knowledge. Then India can combine modern knowledge and ancient knowledge, like that. Modern knowledge mainly concerns physical comfort. Ancient Indian knowledge mainly concerns mental comfort. So inner world, inner peace, like that. So therefore, now you from India? Yeah. Then, so as I mentioned earlier, now modern Indian should pay more attention about your 1,000-year-old knowledge. Because now the modern knowledge, education, not adequate to bring happy society, happy world. The modern knowledge, including science, technology, more knowledge how to make a weapon, including nuclear weapon. So now our future is a demilitarized world, compassionate world. Any problem, basically human problem. So that have to solve through human way. We create some problem, disagreement. Then the solution, we put the responsibility of the solution on gun. Totally wrong. Okay.
So I have a question to do with devices, disease, and disconnection. That today, how much would you blame technology for disruption in relationships, considering everything is at your fingertips? This lack of compassion, empathy, and disconnection. What are your thoughts on that?
Technology itself, wonderful. But it depends people who use technology. Technology used for constructive way, with sense of concern of well-being of humanity, well-being of the world. And then technology, wonderful. But finally, technology you see, how to use technology. So technology itself, wonderful.
Another question, that how do we imbibe kindness and compassion in leadership?
Kasa. The community will be more, how should I say, balanced or holistic educated people.
And in the absence,
So now the existing education, materialistic oriented. So whole generation who come from that kind of education, materialistic culture. So then leader come from that kind of society. You see, no knowledge.
Thank you for those questions.
So now we must think, make effort to change the whole sort of generation, whole society, their way of thinking more holistic, because a holistic way, or thinking about inner world, outer world. And then when we think more seriously about inner world, then naturally compassion involved. Anger. Actually, anger, we are a social animal. Anger expel. Compassion bring together. So, even animal, they appreciate occasionally, but without a weapon, not, I mean, it is limited. We, I think, wonderful human intelligence used for the destructive weapon. I think very pity, very sad. Society think money more important. So selling weapon bring more money. Wrong, short-sighted. The responsibility of weapon is killing, nothing else. Very sad.
Yeah, good morning, His Holiness. My question is two-part. One is that, is it?
If you stand up, please, sir.
Sorry. Especially when it to social media, there's a constant value, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and I see that in my own family, how our nephews and nieces are now completely hooked to it. They think of exists in a world which does not exist, which is program comes at a time when the world is seeing violence in several parts of the world, whether it is the attack in New Zealand or in Texas yesterday, or if you turn the pages in the last several years, there have been several incidents of violence where is that how do you think this course can help such people who resort to violent activities which stems from sheer hatred for a fellow human being? Thank you.
Now, the New Zealand recent event is one example. The leader, you see, she really tried to tackle this problem through non-violence, through compassion, through mutual respect. So although very sad things happen, but no further sort of no further increasing violence. So there are methods. This is example. I really admire the New Zealand Prime Minister, that lady. Really wonderful. So I think that's one living example. So we can learn like that. Then?
So the first question was about the social media and the use of how the youth equates it to happiness or the resources.
Oh, I think basically we pay more attention, more awareness about sort of also the ultimate sort of because the source or factor. Inner peace is the main factor. The very reason we too much sort of drug is lack of inner peace. So they sort of relying, oh, drug may bring some peace of mind. Ignorant. How to bring inner peace? You see, no matter what the surrounding, complicated surrounding, but individual can keep these are they're related with education, knowledge, how to keep peace of mind. Yes?
Do we have more questions?
So it takes time. Now we have to think the fundamental level. Then gradually, I think after 10 years, 20 years, the generation who come through that kind of fuller knowledge, then the individual family become more peaceful with inner strength. Then one family join 10 family, 100 family, 1,000 family, there's a community. Then more peaceful, more healthy-minded community. So we have to think that way. So I'm not expecting some change like a miracle. Next week some change. No. Step by step. There's no other choice. If we satisfy the present condition, doing nothing, then I think that the 21st century will repeat 20th century. Much killing. First World War, Second World War, and then later part of 20th century, live constant fear of Third World War. And then beginning of this 21st century, some sort of violence here and there. These are old thinking. When problem face, immediately they felt how to use that by force. That's totally wrong. So now this is, at the moment, we are beginning of 21st century. We have to think seriously how to build this 21st century more peaceful, more compassionate century. It is possible. Okay.
His Holiness, as you know, India is in its poll His Holiness, in India is in its general election preparation. My question is, what kind of an education needed for nowadays politician, especially because, there are a lot of decisive bribe issues. Everything is here. My second question is, you was so glad to hear that you are specifically saying that India is a country of, India is a secular nation. There are reports and there are news about various parts from India about non-secular activism and all. How you comment on these two?
Sir. Politicians come from the society. So whole society, as I mentioned earlier, because of education, more materialistic society. So politicians come from that kind of society. So they're also thinking money, power. So, incorrect. Second part. Oh. I think India, I think the 1,000 years, the religious harmony there. One example, I always was mentioning the Parsi community in Bombay, less than 100,000. Community, small community, live in big city, over several millions of people, 7 millions of Muslim, 7 million of Christian, 7 millions of Hindus, and then a few million maybe Buddhist or Jain. But no problem. I have some friend, the Parsi. No fear. So very small community, in big city, no fear. So that is India's example. So basically, this country kept all major world religious traditions lived together. I never heard among Indian Muslim problem Shia and Sunni. Thousand years. Sort of here. Over billion populated nation. And India, quite a complicated country, but religious harmony is, I think, wonderful. You can show rest of the world. Now India should be more active to show world at a particular area where you say the different religious belief, some conflict, like in Afghanistan and Syria, in this area, Shia and Sunni problem, and Egypt, Christian and Muslim problems. I think India should make some effort how to make a contribution. Place where conflict in the name of religion. So, since many years, I suggested to Indian government should organize international religious conference. For example, 1956 International Buddhist Conference took place in Delhi. Vice President Dr. Radha Krishna is the chairman of the committee. They organized International Buddhist Conference. So now why not? International Religious Conference, you see, should take in India. Then that, not just one day ceremony, not that way. You see, at the beginning, some leaders, you see, naturally come. So let them say some greetings like that. Then secondary level of religious leader is serious discussion how to make a contribution from this country to the conflict in the name of religion, including Burma. If possible, some delegation from that group go there, these places in Afghanistan, in Iran, or this area. And also, I think the Indian Muslim can make some and then, like the 1956 Buddha Jayanti celebration, Indian government can arrange one facility to pilgrimage, or firstly here, Kasa Jyoti, Kajilagan Kasa, Jomist. Temple here. So since 70, I think 74, I started one practice. Pilgrimage, church, Gurdwara, and Karsa, mosque, and Kare, Senegal, all those different religious traditions, different holy places or temples of different religious tradition, pilgrimage. So like that, I think India can make certain significant, firstly, I think significant impression. Then eventually, you see, truly can make some contribution to reduce conflict in the name of religion. Like that.
We have a gentleman up here who has had... Oh, okay. Okay, we'll take you next, sir.
Thought about Indian Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Louder, louder.
Hello. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Karsa.
Is it more relevant these days educational system?
Ka?
The whole world is a family.
Oh, that's very good. That's very good. All religion, you see, emphasis that, carry that message. Theistic religion, you see, we all created by God. God, infinite love. So you strictly follow that teaching and believe that, and then 7 million human beings are brothers, sisters, or same Father, God. Then you seriously think that impossible to kill each other. All are children of God. Then non-theistic religion here, everything is due to our own action, karma. So if you harm other, you see, you get suffering. You help other, you get benefit. So therefore, ahimsa and karuna through law of causality. This is since the Hindu, I think Sankhya philosophy, there are 2 groups, and then one group, and then Jain philosophy, then Buddhist philosophy, no creator, Atma, no beginning. Go like that. And according to Buddhism, you see, there is some little sort of different view. Atma, in the sense, they completely separate from the body. Buddhists do not accept that, but nobody can deny existence of self. So that's the basis of rebirth. The soul, or Atma, no beginning. So life after life, go like that. So therefore, theoretically speaking, according to these different religions, world is one family. Wonderful, yes.
Sir?
His Holiness, this is the 60th anniversary of your exile in India. During this anniversary period, Chinese government has unleashed operation in the Tibetans living inside Tibet. Foreigners or foreign journalists have been barred to go there. In your teaching, how do you think such oppressed people can react with compassion to their oppressor. And in this light, what is your message to the Tibetans inside Tibet and the Chinese leadership? Thank you.
Firstly, since 74, you see, we not sort of city, not to try to separate Tibet, independence Tibet. So we try, according to Nehru's advice, he very realistic advice. American force will not expel Chinese forces from Tibet. So Pandit Nehru told me, sooner or later, you have to talk with Chinese government. Then no use to raise Tibetan issue at UN. So then, 74, we decided not seeking independence. We tried to seek mutually agreeable solution. So then, 79, we developed direct contact with Chinese government under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping. So basically, our side open. Actually, sometimes I was telling people that I am not splittist, but Chinese government consider me splittist. So Chinese promoting me fight for independence. We are not seeking independence. I always admire the spirit of European Union. Like France and Germany, First World War, Second World War, the really arch enemy. And then my sometimes this side, sometimes this side. So de Gaulle, French de Gaulle, and the German Adenauer, during wartime, Second World War, they think common interest is more important. Then they create European Union. Wonderful. Since the European Union started, then at least those member states of European Union last few decades, no violence, no killing. If European Union not start, perhaps last a few decades, some violence, some killing may take place. So I really admire the spirit of European Union. So I often used to telling that spirit should create Latin America and then Northern Africa. Africa too big, so Northern Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, something like that. Some kind of union should take place. So, therefore, our own case, I prefer you remain, Tibet remain within the People's Republic of China, some kind of union, like that. So in China, over 7 centuries, Tibet and China, very close link. I think mainly through marriage, very close link. And most important Buddha statue, which we kept in Lhasa, firstly from Bodh Gaya, then I think Tang Emperor in Xi'an. I saw the seat of that Buddha statue, now empty. So when I visited there, they told me that Buddha statue, firstly from Bodh Gaya to that Xi'an temple, Buddhist temple, then from there to Lhasa. Now still there. During Cultural Revolution, the Buddha statue also gets some punishment. But I don't think the Buddha statue as a statue, I don't think any pain when they hit like that. So therefore, you see, I feel much better. Live side by side. Economically, money matter, they can help immensely. Now in Tibet, much development, material sort of thing. At the same time, we can help them. The Buddhist knowledge, like that. And China, historically, Buddhist country. And also same source, Nalanda tradition. Tangsen came to Nalanda and introduced Buddha Dharma according to Nalanda tradition. So it's the same teacher, Nagarjuna, like that. Okay, now?
We just have time for...
the last 3 questions now.
Just two more now.
Last 2 questions.
Yeah. So have here and then here.
Can I ask? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
So, His Holiness, you were referring to religious harmony in India.
Yes.
Wherein Buddhists, Parsis, and other communities are living peacefully. I would like to take your comment on the plight of Indian Muslim right now, where, for example, if we take the incident of Gurugram, wherein a Muslim family, the entire family was assaulted by Hindus in the name of religion. So, and kids are getting influenced by this kind of, this kind of conflict, basically, where I recently read somewhere that a kid called, that a Muslim kid was called a Pakistani by his classmate. So kids are, getting influenced by whatever is happening in the country right now. So your comments on that. One more thing, because you were speaking in context with the Chinese government, I would like to ask you about this entire controversy around the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama, wherein you have said that it might be, the next reincarnation might be founded in India, but the Chinese government is saying that it has to be approved by them. So your comments and how do you plan to deal with that?
The first part, I always look more from wider perspective. Then India, wonderful. Then over billion Indian, everyone not sort of, the holy plate, holy person. So mischievous people must be there. Even Buddha's own time, some mischievous people there. The over 1,000 years. That few mischievous people sort of activities cannot sort of, because of the symbol of the whole nation. Okay, we Tibetan, Buddhist, peaceful, but so that is a reality, no problem. The second part, I think, question whether I can live, how long I can live. And within, suppose if I live another 15 years or 10, 15 years, then I think the political situation in China will change. If I die next year, then, of course, the Chinese government seriously show reincarnation. must born in China. So my reincarnation, whether my sort of rebirth, not necessarily one particular place. My belief is, so long space remain, so long sentient beings suffering remain, I will remain. The first Dalai Lama also, you see, express, you see, he have no wish to born heaven. His wish, wherever some suffering area, some possibility to help someone, help us some extent, he want to or wish, you see, born that place. I also, you see, so long space remain. That's my belief. And according to my practice, I practice altruism, bodhicitta, immense help. So therefore, my sort of determination is, so long space remain, so long sentient beings suffering remain, I will remain. If whole world disappear, then I'm free.
Thank you so much, Your Holiness. I'm afraid that due to His Holiness's schedule, we'll have to end now, but Professor Gernot Reichel and I will be available also for interviews should you want to have more questions. In closing, please allow me to express our heartfelt thanks to His Holiness and to our expert advisors for joining us, as well as our thanks to our key patrons, the Ganden Podrang Foundation of the Dalai Lama, Yeshe Korlo Foundation, Pierre and Pamela Midyar Fund, and also the representatives of the host organizations of the launch, Mr. Tempa Tsereng from the Dalai Lama Trust, Mr. Veer Singh from Vana Foundation, Dr. Robert Paul and Dr. Gary Hawk from Emory University, and the Andaz Hotel for hosting the press conference and the refreshments which will now follow. We thank you all very much for being with us here today. We thank the media for being here during this very busy time. And if you please just hold back for a moment while His Holiness departs. Thank you.